Tlachonach Lichéesh Satini Johan. Yaha Anika with Zantik Ihini Ka Jakuk Saoe Akquan Hasta Anikuk. Jayguginki A Qone Glade Dakusatan. Echosaku Hoa Wasakatlan with Glade. Teshika Quati. Quash Siyakin Hoa Su Glade Dakusatan. One Qanins Lishuko Ataya Hayukatangi. Atukaya Kutsati. Quash Yagi Aya with Glade. Akai Shukwa. Just chicle away with cut away was giddy. Conachaway wootla. Nooked hardly you do a sock, nooked hardly. You owe played he no achina cowani, kehi nook. At shook away at that. Conachaway shuko at shook, singiduk a tangitin. Quashgaya gi hoa, Táax'aa skasniki, a dati jagachtine. A qachayeku ginkwe, object pronouns, Adusa aya duka atwune. Lichéesh aqayiq aqawus Táax'aa qatawusi ajiyeti. Lichéesh. It's great to see everybody. Let's see, we had in the Juneau area on Akquan Ani some of the first snowfalls of the year, these being down on the lower parts, and don't know how deep it's gonna get. Might be a while before it gets deep. But then I was thinking, sometimes there's funny things in our language. So right around when it first starts to snow, like you tend to get different types of snow. So like, maybe we'll just look at a snow list. I got a whole thing on snow. But if you had really, so just to say snow on its own, it's D-L-E-I-T. So the word is glate. Everybody say it. Glate.
Glade.
Glade.
Glate.
Glade.
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 So going back to weather, you can say dak guchsatan or dak wusatan. Sorry, dak wusatan would be it snowed or it's snowing. So if you said glade dak wusatan. So the verb there is dak wusatan. But I've been told you can only say glade or siu. So you can either say it's snowing or it's raining, and that's kind of all you got. But then you can talk about different types of snow. So when I first noticed that it was snowing, my kids, Achetki, Hayetki, they were talking about it. So we went outside to look, and it was Glade Yetki. So Glade Yetki would be literally like snow babies or children's snow. And those are just real tiny, tiny flakes. And so sometimes those are the first ones that you get. And then other times you're going to have just glade, which is just snow. But early in the snow season here, sometimes you get these really big flakes. And then they're really big, and when they hit the ground, they just melt right away. For whatever reason, they're called nukthatli, which is grouse poop. So those snowflakes are called grouse poop. And I remember when an elder told me, he said, Nukthatli do a sakyata adeitletak nastan away that. He says, it's called, and I said, grouse poop? And he says, yeah, and then he just laughed, and it's really fun to laugh in our language. There's quite a few things that are funny, and just things that they're okay to laugh at, and they're okay to have fun with. There's another elder, that was John Martin Kehinuk, who told me about Nukthatli. And then there's an elder named Kakshaki, and he was telling me, Yiskachat was tiin. Yewe chasatin ha anikak. Just the cut ye chaya ataswu ya way with the shan ya ya just has to toss a goo. Has to what a chakut ku on has a shukik. And you that ho in khat the shan a ka ach to us a goo too. We chakuta ku hastu inaya at kakwashuk. So he said, when I was a young man, I used to look around the village and say, geez, old people just walk around trying to find someone to laugh with. He says, now that I'm an old man, I just walk around and find people to laugh with. So it's like, that's it. There's a good friggin' key right there. So I thought today we'd look at the mosquito story. So we kind of wrapped up the little kid story. It was fun. We made it all the way through. So we're gonna do we'll do a bigger story. There are a few scary moments in there, but nothing too horrible. We kind of start with scary stuff when we're pretty young, but it depends on the age groups that we're talking with in terms of how we scale back some details. So I thought we'd take a look at that, and then we'll look at different ways we can examine a story and use it to learn. And then we'll look at object pronouns and just sort of say, what are those and how do they work? And there's a list of them. Dog's starting to cry. And yeah. And so I thought those are the two things we'd focus on today. But I'll just ask, does anybody have any things you're thinking about or questions, thoughts?
Yeah. Wasa dusak yata shinget kena disappointment the snow is gone.
Oh yeah. You say Lichéesh Tóoch. I would probably say Táax'aa. Wait, late. So Lichéesh Tóoch. I don't feel good about it. So Tóoch is I feel good about it. And then we can say, I guess I'll put this in there. I'll do it this way. Hold on a second. Okay. We'll drop that. So you could say Táax'aa, and that is I feel good. And so then you could feel good about things, right? So there's different ways to tie these things together. Like you could say Táax'aa, late, doc, wustani. So that's I feel good that it is snowing. So there's a couple of things. So Táax'aa, so we can see how that works, right? So Táax'aa. So there's which is for something to be good. Tuwu is like my feelings or my thoughts or my spirit. Ach is my. So there is something you could change right there, which is a possessive pronoun. So ituwu you feel good. Hatuwu we feel good. Dutuwu they feel good. But if you want to tie a second verb to it, the second verb it should go through a change. And it's a bit strange. But if you want the sort of getting started cheat code, if you go look up the verb in what we call the negative perfective, which would mean it didn't happen or it didn't become that way, you're going to grab that form and then you're going to throw the letter I, sometimes the letter U, on the end. So now you say, I feel good that it is snowing. So that's how you tie, just like when you say Lichéesh, Ichsatin, Lichéesh Ichsatini. So the second verb does go through a change. You could start by just throwing the letter I on the second one. It's like, I don't know, it's something like that. But then the more you study Tlingit, the more you'll unlock. You just unlock more cheat codes. So we could change this verb negative. So once we put Lichéesh, and that could be heish, it could be Lichéesh, Clesh, Hesh, Tish, Clish. It's got a bunch of different variations, but it really just means not. So once that pops up in front of a verb, that will change the verb. Because we're going to say, no, it's not that way. It's not like this. So even if there's stuff in front of it, it's just going to jump over them. And then this verb is going to turn into this. Uke. So that's the negative form of yak-e. So that goes through some changes. This is the classifier. It goes from ya to nothing. It just turns into this little zero. And then you get this in the front, which linguistically is called the irrealis. It really just means there's some kind of conflict with reality. So it's going to be in all negative verb forms, that letter U is going to pop up there. All the future forms, whether you're talking about positive or negative, will happen, won't happen, will be that way, won't be that way. One of the things that this does is it marks that the verb hasn't happened, or it isn't that way. So it marks, it'll be there for all negative forms. It'll also just sometimes just pop up, because sometimes we're comparing something. You say ye ku gay, and you got this ku in the front because that thing pops in there. Because you're comparing something. You're saying it's this big. But because you're using a comparison, that thing pops up. So now we got Táax'aa okay, which is I don't feel good. And there is some of these verbs like yak-e has a positive version, has a negative version, good, not good. And this verb also has an opposite version. So you could say this, it can contract sometimes to something else, but we'll keep it in a long form. So now the classifier has changed. And if the classifier changes, it's like a classifier exists within a group. There's 4 groups, the 0 group, the S group, the L group, the SH group. So now it went from the 0 to the SH group. That means it's a different verb. But this would be I feel bad. So you can say good, not good, bad. Not every verb does this. There's maybe 10 of them or so that do this. But they do it in a very similar way. So you can say lucky, not lucky, unlucky. Strong, not strong, weak. And good, not good, bad. So now that we've got that figured out, now we could say, and it depends. Now you can have your levels of dramatic reaction. Like, oh, I don't feel good about that. Oh, I feel bad. I feel so bad. It depends. Maybe it is really bad. So now you can do the same thing. Lichéesh, that one doesn't change. And then I would say wait late. He. So this verb he, there would be 2 O's in the front. Oops, I'll let someone in. So that would mean, I'll just put it down underneath it. I don't feel good that the snow disappeared. So you could say it melted and stuff, but I would probably just say ach-wuhi, which means it disappeared. Like, where'd it go? Okay. Lichéesh, good question. But for those of you who are starting to experiment with sort of putting sentences together, and so you could just start trying them out. I feel good that I'm drinking coffee. I feel good that you're here. I feel good that we're learning Tlingit. I feel bad that the cat ran away, or whatever the thing is. I don't want anybody's cat to run away, but just whatever the thing is. And we always, whenever we practice this stuff too, we just have we inherited some habits from our elders, which is some of them don't like to talk about bad stuff. So if you start talking about being lonely, or you start talking about people passing away and stuff, which I think you need to have that language to talk about that kind of stuff in the language. But then when we're practicing stuff like that, like I don't feel good and I feel bad, we just like to say nobody wants to feel good, nobody wants to feel bad. We're just learning how to say it. So dear universe, don't send those vibes our way. Because in Tlingit, sometimes you can talk things into being. Like you just say it enough times and it's going to happen. So sometimes one elder in particular that we work with, he's real old school with stuff like that. And he'll be like, don't say it like that, it's going to happen. So any other thoughts or questions?
Bodhi and I were wondering, we've seen, place name maps, but we haven't located if there's a name for the place where we live out Thane. Do you know if there's a map you could guide us to, or do you know if there's a name for this particular region?
Yeah, I think it's it's like a festering sore for some reason. That's what the name is.
This is horrible.
I didn't name it, and I don't know the reasons why. But there's so I'll show you folks a couple of resources. So there's some work going on right now actually to restore Tlingit place names. So what we mean by that is some places have a name like Thane or Gold Creek, and we're going to initiate some efforts to actually reclaim the name of some of these places. I'm starting with a list of about 20. We'll go for about 20 of these in the Juneau areas where we're going to start this. There's a group behind this, some folks on the city council and some folks in the state legislature, and then some folks who are working at Tlingit. So with place names, there's tons of good stuff that's out there. So one of those things is the place name book, which I should link to this page. I don't know why it's not linked here. But if you go to resources and beginning materials, and if you scroll down, there's place names. So this is just the list of names and the maps pulled from Tom Thornton's book, the book that he edited through Sealaska Heritage Institute. So you can the nice thing about this is, let me open a version so you folks can see what it looks like. I think one of the real nice things is you can just put it on your device so you can have it. So one time I was on an airplane and I was flying over a spot and I was like, hey, I wonder what that place is called. And these maps, it's tricky to figure out how to do these maps where you're trying to put every region typically has 2 maps, and some of these areas have over 1,000 place names. Oh, oops. Do my shares? Can you folks see? Okay, maybe there's a delay. Okay. I think sometimes if I drag a window, it pauses the screen share, and then I don't know how to unpause all the time. Okay. So, we start in Yakutat, and so on the left-hand side, the text might be really small on your end, but these are the communities. So you could go to Akquan Kat Akukwan. And so that gets us here. And sometimes these maps are a little tough to read, so there is some work that's being done as well to try and just update some of this stuff in terms of using different software that exists right now. And we're probably gonna this thing's gonna have multiple phases. So one phase is gonna be community education. So I'm teaming up with Alaska Robotics, Pat Race, and we're going to make a series of short videos, just little 30-second clips with some of these names and focusing on the names that we're hoping people will just start using. So one is just like focusing on the people. Say, hey, people, start using this. Just start to call it this. It's okay. It's okay to call it this. Here's how you say it. Please start using this. So it's a joint sort of public education and public advocacy sort of campaign. Then there's a political side where you're going to go through the process to try and officially restore the names. So for here, I do think I might have to zoom in. Kind of looking down around, maybe like we'll check out 126, 128 and see what's down there. So you kind of, if we zoom in, we can sort of see, like, I don't know, maybe that's downtown somewhere. I don't know. I'm not very good. I usually got to have this map open and like some other map so I can just compare them. But I will show you folks another thing right after this. So we'll just go down to the hundreds and start seeing what we could find. And then I'll show you another technique that we can use to find stuff. So we start getting down here, then we start just scrolling through. So we're kind of up in the Tóoch area here. Tóoch, Ginny is pretty close to my place, you know. And then we just start going through, and we can start on the right-hand side, and what we're looking for is Thane. And if we scroll down, we see it down here, and it's Tóoch. So it is an oozing sore. But maybe there's something to that in terms of some kind of uprising that's on the land there somewhere, or something that might have happened. Some of the place names are pretty straightforward. Like you can say whoosh is together, ki is upwards, nach is along or via or through, day is a road or a trail. So whoosh ki nach deyi. So as you start learning more and more Tlingit, I think it also sort of unlocks how a bunch of the words work, and then they become easier to remember because you could see the parts that are in there. Sa is like a voice or this part of the body, the base of the neck, and then Yake is a spirit helper for a medicine person. Day is a road or a trail. Sh is the end of something. So there's a whole bunch of these where you could get in there and you could see pretty much how they work. So the other thing that I could have done, like let's just say I open this document up. It doesn't have all the explanation text of who lives there and other things like that. That's in the whole book, which is wonderful. But I could type Thane up here and then I'll go look for it. So this is another nice thing about this is that it's been scanned. So if you know the name of something, like you can hit Mendenhall and you probably get 1,000 results. And but then you can see, so you'll find the glacier, the lake, the valley, things like that. There's a few things that we're working on, folks, to adjust some things in the Juneau area because a few things might have a different name that we have heard, especially thinking of the work that Marie Olson has done with Cecilia Coons and how much she documented some stuff. So I think a few things as you look into this one, there's probably a more general way to say the Mendenhall Valley. There's a way to say the airport, Táax'aa, and then there's a way to say the grassy area. If you went south on the Egan Highway, uh, and then you see those sort of grassy areas just south of the airport, that's called Chukan'ani. So that's the grassland or prairie. It's just a pretty generic name for those things. Then if you get down to the Gastineau Channel, the name of that is Sitka on the channel. And then the Mendenhall River is Woosh Ikluchuhin. It runs itself murky. I see a hand up. Is there a question or a thought?
I have a question. I'm so glad that Ati and Bodhi asked because I've been wondering. I have the book and I love the book and I take it everywhere. But I've been trying to also pinpoint like the name for where I live. And I like between Lena, there's a name for the English Lena Point, which is Cloudberry Point, and then there's a name for Tea Harbor. And I find myself in the middle of those two places. There's not a dot on the map. And so I guess just like any suggestion for like honing it in, like where do I live? Where is this?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And there's a few things with this. One is there are a number of place names that aren't on here. And so they left some out. If it starts to lean too close to like suggesting that there's a medicine person buried around there, then they probably took it off because someone's probably going to go dig that person up because that's just how things are. People just take our stuff and take our people. But then also sometimes some names got lost too. I'm sure there were names for all kinds of stuff. And generally the place names are pretty specific. So like there's no one name that works well for like Juneau or, so when you're naming things in sort of English conventions for how colonial America typically works is you kind of got these blocks. Like this block is called Thane and this block is called downtown Juneau. And sometimes there'll be these sort of local names and then there'll be the names on the maps. So there's going to be a bunch of spots that we don't really have names for specifically. And so there's been some work that's been started to sort of say, okay, we need to educate folks on the names, we need to restore the place names, and we need to start getting ourselves ready to create new names. Because there could be spots where maybe there wasn't something in that particular area. And so I would say for now, pick one that's closer to you or that you feel like is closer to you. You could always throw this word on there. Let's see. So like, let's say we just went to, what?
Do Lena Point because I want to hear you say it.
So here's Lena Point. So we'll zoom in. And then, I don't think I want to type on here. So here's nech. And I'm gonna retype this somewhere else so I could show you folks something. So we go back to here. We're gonna duplicate this. So we got a place name, right? So this first word is cloudberry, and it's a tough word. It's got this, but when we say this word, it's nech,
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 nech.
Yeah.
nech.
Right here, after you've said ne,
Sorry, could you say that?
after you've said ne, I don't know, the other day I was saying something, I was in class, and my watch said, "That's not nice." It's like, what did I say? uh, so after you say ne, your lungs are actually going to close.
Nech.
Close. And you have to do this last part while holding your breath. So if I took a deep breath, I should be able to go. And at the end, my lips are pursed, and it's like I'm gonna hold my breath, make this underline X sound, and blow out a little tiny birthday candle. Or else I don't get any presents if I can't also blow out that candle. So it's
Yeah.
very slight puff of air that comes through. It's not voiced, but it goes right at the end. So you have nech.
Nech.
No.
The second word is a point. So this can be the tip of a branch. It could be the point. It could be the point of something like a spear, and it could also be a point of land. So it's interchangeable. There's quite a few things that are like that. Like the land can have a nose, and a person can have a nose, and it's the same word for a beak, you know. So ah is the second one. But then we get this last part, which is a relational or possessive suffix. So that's, you're going to see a whole bunch of these in these place names. So for example, the word for this is gucha, right? So cup is gucha, but if it's mine, it's going to change a little bit. Oops, let me use this one. To say it's my cup, it's going to go ach guchayi. So here's another, just like that sort of verb pattern we were looking at a little while ago. For starters, throw an I on it. And so with Tlingit though, a lot of times in English the possessive marker, like let's say we have a dog. Oops, I meant to write that in English. And then we have bone, right? So to make it the dog's bone, the thing that owns it changes. So we use this apostrophe S. If we use Tlingit grammar in English, we would go like that. The possessive marker goes on the owned thing, not on the owner. So that's one of the logical sort of shifts. But then all we're doing is really adding a suffix, right? So if we have dog, which is Kate, and we have bone, which is sak, then we get Kate, sak. There are a few, the rules do get a little bit complicated because there are sets of one sound that'll switch to another. But what it comes down to is there is a voiced pair. And what that means is this underlined K sound, if you just sort of put your fingers right here and go, this is the same sound as this, except you activate your vocal cords. So we'll go underline K, underline G. And those are challenging sounds to make. But if you think about it, they are coming from the exact same spot in your whole mouth, throat, back of the mouth thing. So one thing that you could do is you could take something like this and you could say Nek Ayi, and if this is a place name, we'll go ahead and capitalize those. And then we could throw Dane after the N. Dane means in the area of. So it's somewhere around this area. So that's another way you can make this stuff work as well. And then you could say blank ka blank ak. So if you had one place name, if you said something like Katach Jini, Ka Eich Guthin Ak. That means between those places. That's what Ak means. Okay, those are good questions. Okay. Let's shift gears and let's look at a story. So this is on YouTube, so you can check it out there. If you look for Robert Zuboff, you should be able to find it there. If you typed Táax'aa with the type of apostrophe that we use, you could find it there as well. And if you typed Clinket Mosquito, it might show up. So there's a few versions that I've put together of this story, so we're going to listen to this. There are parts that do go by pretty fast. I think Shah Dog was a very good person to record because he kind of knew to slow it down a little bit when he was recording because he knew that people were going to be learning from his language. He was born a long time ago. He lived in this area called Angun. He was Qakwedi and Daklawedi Yeti. But we'll take a look. We'll see a picture of him. We'll see a little bit of information about him. And then it's just going to start. But even though it's going to start and we're just going to watch the whole thing all the way through, it takes about 7 minutes. Then we're going to come back and sort of talk about how can you continue to learn from something like this. You got a great story. It is going to go by kind of fast, but I'm going to show you. I'm going to put links up on our class page so that you can watch this again. It's there. You can watch as many times as you want. We got links to the audio. If you want to download the audio, put it on your device. You get some kind of smartphone or something. You could download it onto there. Few steps to get stuff onto phones. But if you want to put it on a computer, whatever, you could just walk around and listen to this. Then you can have the text, and then if we read the English, you already know the story. And then you can just keep listening to it and sing it, and it's gonna keep working itself into your brain. So I'm gonna hit play. Oh, I think I gotta do the sound thing. Hold on. Share sound, and then we'll check in when it's done.
أول ويخ يعقو يكت قاعد يد الساقن أيك توات نخاق أسقيو أول يخت وساق شنقت خينخ شاطان أول يا أخصاين نخاوة أول خطو خقيت وين تاقو آية تاقو يستق خدسته كتو يستق خدسته تخصينا يعقو خشيه وته I had 1906 model. Zoeken nog gemaakt gaan als tien. Oude tegen je te ja ken. Ja hoe je aje of giet je wat zitten. Kijk, kook ze wat. Je rekt dat boot. Hoe je dat nog gaat je afkomen. Oude ja saai het koe oude. Je dat ze ka. Toch is het goed in vannacht dag kan ik ja is saai. Yudak Kaya, Akleha Wutir, Takaya Wutir, Hakustiak, Yachat, Ya Iskatach, Hakekakch, Yachat, Ayatak Tadach Sayahak, Yachat, Konach, Yatik, Kusteyudaka, what is Sayo, Ja'au Jisha, and Kine, Kusakhan Kutsiti, Wega. Awe Atayo Atasat Kinut, Ya Iskada House Gaze, Atayo Atasat Kinut. To Atayo Atasat Ge Aya, Ya take a tea, Ya family, has to Khan Ati, Ya Konakin. Aya Tenakati, Te Awatun, Uquajaki Atka, Tessia Kuku, De Aya, Ya to Yedate, to Creek, Yakaku was she. Teho Aya, so Tessia Kuku. Kuku, Daya Kikea. Question Kata Patakatusho, question Kata Katusho, Giste, Yakikea. Jayanas Kachaya to Hunhohaska Yakunashin. Ayadak Yashak, Akaha Ayausitin, Kaya, to Kayo Siku, Kusakakon Satiye. Schandayana, good Tessa, the owner, the Hania, and not to do the at the Hayot Cool Street, I should say. Schandayana, good the old cash shower, Hitchower, Kusakakonjo shower, Hitch, Ticket out ticket. Wasn't the two you gave Kusakon, at the house, sit away at the great two day. With two day. Te awaya to anete to hit the Táax'aa yete. Gan awa, gan kawus, kawa kahelchin, witu yana ye. A yite to hit the yitenes, kotwak sakon, where taka awa, where yana too. Awa ko awa to take good, as koza ya take the son, hat, a stout, say a hawaiana. A Tóoch ke good hour to Chechenre, Sakhan Kusse. Ayayke Wahan Ganach, to Taganach Ayran as anything, now a shower hitch, so a shower hitch, so a shower hitch, so a shower hitch. Yekayaka, Kosiku Ayakwaja, Sakhan, Hanik ko Ayakatu Sene, a Hunhohasaya Tachnacha, Jack. Was gets a gersen, gets so nick then on the yetha. It is to eat a ho get sakane. Ayahawa should at the ark. Cut our hot and cut our hot. Workus hakon. Catch us a kick the eye, tea our catch a tax and cut to the shat. Was gets a gersen, workus hakon, catch again. I just a time cut to the shatri awa of Siu. Workus hakon catch a awa of Siu. Kawaii, our Táax'aa who sit. A Joe Táax'aa who was Táax'aa to take Kujia Hawaii, Hakon Hawasiti, yes. So I would talk to our Toasikoya Kashi, Katuke Kawuche. Yeah, I would the key on cow, Yasin get on it. I'll say, Konach house, the Khan. Ayasin get anika ate, Ayasin get anika, Ayasin get anika, Yausi, Ya Táax'aa, Ajaya ye, Atach Kasni. Kutsiki, Ayahati, ye Aya Taslan, Ya attend to one Ya caribou cross, Yido, Sak, يا تكتو أدي أنخنا عادية أخنك أيا يدو ساق تسلا أيا شيتهين ها شيتهين أخ يسو آية هايا خينا خيوز خسي أدك يأين قطان يا يدك يا أديت ختين كبخسني تتاقين.
Gets a little loud at the end. There's like a, I think Nora told, Nora, so Keochne and Nora Dowenhauer recorded that. I think they were outside of it in the school in Angoon, and like there was a basketball game going on, and it just got out, and people were coming out when it just sort of ended. There was kind of a neat area where he drags the cannibal onto a fire, and everybody's cheering. And it sounds like they were just real happy about that moment, but it's just things going parallel to each other a little bit. So the story, it goes by kind of fast, right? So if it's the first time you've encountered it, even though yeah, even though he's speaking at a real nice pace as far as a Tlingit learner goes, it could go a little slower, but you know, that's maybe as slow as he could get it. And then he also just gets excited during certain parts, like when he gets kind of frozen. But yeah, and it's really neat to sort of see these things and then to see the recording. So like, let's talk for a minute about how you can use this, because there's a set of stories that I think we should all be mastering. One, so that we know these stories and we can just refer to them. I think when you listen to Tlingit people talk from long ago, people who were elders in the 90s and the early 2000s, they keep going back to this set of stories. Duktuk is a big one. The person who tore the sea lion in half, and then his name means dark skin. And then Táax'aa. Táax'aa, there's a couple stories, like there's a woman who married a bear. The name of that is the woman who said something to offend the bear. And the name of this one is Mosquito. And these two stories are really interesting to me because they're all over the place. There's a Tsimshian version of this story. For the woman who married the bear, there's versions that go probably all the way up to Koyukon country. So some of these they're really well, they've got a wide area in terms of where this exact same story is told. And you get lots of variation. Even within Tlingit peoples, you get big variations between particular stories. So it's very common. But one of the things, and then, yeah, I see some things in the chat that you could slow these things down. There's some different things you could use. There's this program that we use a lot called Elon, which we use to, I'll show you that real quick, and then we'll come back to talk. So if you're dealing with Tlingit and you're trying to sort of translate it as you go, there's different levels of this stuff. So for example, you might have something, what am I trying to do? Okay, so you might have something where you have the Tlingit already written down, and then you're translating that. That's wonderful because a lot of that is just kind of done for you. Then you can take, if you have a video where you're trying to record the speakers. This is Lichéesh, George Davis. I think I recorded this in maybe 2013 or 14 maybe. So this program is very powerful in terms of what it allows you to do. It's called Elan or Elan, depends on, I don't know if there's some preferred way they have to say it. But so you could sort of take a line like this, and it shows you, you could see where the audio is. And then you can highlight that and just play the audio. Let me make sure I'm still sharing my sound. Okay. So I'll just play it. So then you can hear him say that, right? And you could play it again, you could play it again, you could play it again. And this one, it does have controls so that you could slow it down. And what's kind of interesting about this is okay. sometimes the program wigs out. But the nice thing about it, I'll pull it back up. It was stuck. Is this is what we use to do a lot of our active translation now. So if we recorded someone and we need to write down what they were saying, this is what we would use. And so you'd take a moment. Try and pull it back up. Okay. So you take a part like this and you'd highlight it and you'd play it, and there's some shortcut keys to do so. And then you'd go through and you'd listen to a bunch of times and you'd write down the tlingit, right? So ayisawe ashude yakunash gatsch. So then you could write down the tlingit and then you could go in and translate it. This is very advanced stuff. Like to sort of take this recording, which I think is, let's see. Oh, there's a little thing down here. So it's about 27 minutes long. If I were to just sit down and just say, okay, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to transcribe and translate this whole thing, and I'm not going to stop until I'm done. I think that would, I can usually do about 5 to 7 minutes per hour. So whatever the math is, it'd probably take me about 5 to 7 hours. But I couldn't do it in one sitting because it makes you very tired. But this is, for people who really become high-level speakers, I think they end up doing quite a bit of this work, because this is where you really test yourself in terms of like, am I able to hear every single word that's being said, and do I know how they work, and do I know how to translate that? Because you might sort of have this word-for-word translation, and then you need to adjust it so it sounds okay in English. So, but this didn't exist when they were working on Táax'aa. They were just using a tape recorder, play, rewind, you know. And sometimes, I'm sure that Táax'aa story was recorded on a big, like, on an Ampex reel-to-reel recorder. Okay. So let's talk about what else you can do with Táax'aa. So you can have the audio, right? So you can download it. I'll show you where you can get it. I'll put the links up to our class webpage as well. And then you've got this YouTube video. You can download from YouTube as well. If you want to copy the video, just let me know. I can, what I try to do is I upload them to YouTube, and anything that I make, I just upload it to YouTube, and then I've got it backed up on a drive, right? I guess it's all owned by Google and the university. I don't know how that's all going to shake out in the end, but so let's look at, this is the printed version in Hashuka. So this was printed in Hashuka, which came out, oh, I don't remember, 1981 maybe? Let's take a look at it. There are some things, like as a language community, Hashuka is fabulous. But it's also, the copyright is owned by the University of Washington Press. And I don't really recommend sticking with that model, because if you want to have like a free PDF for people to use, their lawyers will come for you. And I'm like, who are you guys? You don't own nothing, but they kind of do. So whatever. Nana E to them, whoever wrote me that letter. So so this is, let's see, I was just trying to get to when. So 1987. So this came out in 1987. Tremendous, incredible amount of work. If you want to know some of the backstory, some of it is actually in here. And then there's a film that I made with Nora and Richard where they talked about doing a bunch of this work. The very first story that was ever totally done was this one. So what I mean by done is they recorded it in Tlingit. They wrote down all of the Tlingit, and then they translated it all over to English. This was the first story that was ever done for in Tlingit, line by line. This is by Tom Peters, who's from Teslin. And it was pretty fun when they told the story, because they said they went up there. On the way up, I think they recorded my great-grandpa while he was still alive in Skagway. And then they went up and recorded Tom Peters telling the story. And there's a song, like you don't see, it mentions the song. And we've got the song on the recording. I can show you where the recording is for this as well. Wonderful, wonderful story. But after he sang the songs, he kind of stopped. And then they left. And then they wrote the whole, Nora could understand him. Richard Downhart could probably understand most of what he said. And then they wrote it all down. And then they went back to sort of check it with him. They said, we want to check this with you. So a whole year has gone by. He's like, all right. And then Richard Downhauer read it to him. Just like, because these were the words that came out of his mouth, and then Richard Downhauer just read it. And when he got done, they said, Tom Peters said, I didn't know you could speak Tlingit that well. That was great. And they said, no, those are your words. He says, oh, that's a great story. Let me tell you how it ends. And then he didn't get to the end of the story. So they brought the recorder back out and they recorded the second section. And it was fun because they told me that. And then when I found the audio for the story, it was true. It cuts off. And then I found the second part. And so then I mushed them together. So we've got those two versions of the audio put together. So you can go through a text like this and read it. You should. And then if you really want to get to know this stuff, you can retype it. Like that, even though it's already there, you can go through and you can type Dach nach Sha, or let's just jump to the Táax'aa story. So we're looking at the same one. Awe, we ach yagu yikt, guide you do sagan. And we've already retyped quite a few of these. I'm retyping the Tóoch story right now. I think the typist for this was, I want to say it was Barbara Cadiente, if I remember right. But yeah, doing all this stuff on a typewriter, wow. We do it on a computer now, it's faster. But in terms of, there's also some things that I've been making for this story, going back to where we're taking notes. So this is the actual slideshow just that I made so that you can sort of have it go sentence by sentence, more or less, coming through. So I've got a blown up version of this as well, where we say, okay, let's just start color coding the parts of speech in here. So I have independent pronouns. So that means me, you, them, us, you all, them all. Not tied to anything grammatically. These sound like this. Chet, wa'eh, hu, uhan, yuhan, hus. And then there's also ka and ut. But those are independent pronouns. Then there's possessive pronouns, which mean my, or in some cases, the way that Tlingit works, around me, stuff like that. So that would be my, your, their, our, y'all's, them all's. How will we say that last one? And so that one is ach, I, du, ha, ye, hastu. Then there's a set, if you're, the intermediate Tlingit class is going through this stuff right now. Direction and location, where things are and how we talk about them. In English, these are usually called prepositional phrases. In Tlingit, they're called postpositions. There's some complications with them. They're a little tricky. But so kind of, I'll probably go through, and I might adjust this color scheme a little bit. And I got to finish this slideshow someday. So then we have object pronouns, which I'll probably change to blue. So the object pronoun is the one that the verb is happening to. Then there's conjugation stuff, which is how do you start moving the verb around from like, it happened, it is happening, it will happen, it didn't happen. All that stuff happens in, or the majority of that stuff happens in one location in the verb. It's kind of smushed in this spot up towards the front. The subject pronoun is the one who does it. And then there's the verb root. And so these are kind of all your main parts of speech and Tlingit. There's some other things like there's adverbs and adjectives and stuff. So then if you go through, you can take a look at it like this. And the way, eventually I'll have this thing done and you'll be able to go here and click on it. Let's see, maybe I gotta click on it twice.
Awe, wech yaku yikt, guide you to sagan, a yikt awat nachakot. A speel. Awe, wech yaku yikt, guide you to sagan, a yikt awat nachakot. A speel.
So this chops up the audio. So it takes up one sentence and it says it twice, right? So then you can listen to that sentence twice. Maybe you could try and say it. If you're moving along with your Tlingit, what I would recommend is you try to say it and you try to sound exactly like the master speaker, Shah Dog. Just try and sound like him, right? Then you can go through and you can look at it. Like here's the Tlingit. Awe we achyagu yikt guide you to saken a yiktewe nachakuch a skewu. You'll notice sometimes the end of words kind of fades out quite a bit, and there's some different things that you'll notice as you go through. Then if you want to pull it apart, this is one, the top line is starting to color code it to say, hey, look, here's one of these things, here's one of those things, here's one of, so any of these orange are these direction, location things. Anything in green is a possessive pronoun. I'm going to adjust the color scheme a little bit when it's done. I'll finish this sometime soon. But then it just sort of, it shows you what's there without pulling it apart yet. Underneath it is what we call the segment. So segmenting a language means, especially for Native American languages, it's very common for it to be a bunch of things that smush together. So awe is actually two different words that smush into one. And then ach, we, ach, yak, yik, t. So it just sort of pulls those things apart. Then underneath it is a translation. And there's different ways to do this. Like if you want to do more of a word by word thing, you'd say focus there. Like that's literally how it works. Then you could do a fourth line if you wanted to say, when we translate awe, it does literally mean that is. But in Tlingit language, there's a bunch of times where you don't have to translate it, or you could say so it is. It's used to sort of keep your mode of thought going. It works sometimes as a bit of a comma, like just get a little bit of separation between ideas. It could mean I'm still talking. It could mean I'm taking a little break, taking a breath here, collecting myself. And it's almost like the word but it has a lot more strong uses. Like, you know, if you're public speaking, they're trying to teach you not to use But in Tlingit you could use awe, and you still sound really smart, so it's okay. So it's a really good word to start using as well. As you're starting to practice speaking Tlingit, if you have to do something in front of people, then you start sweating, getting nervous, you say, oh, and that gives you a little pause. So this is another thing. So I'll work on finishing this up so that we can have it. I'll put this draft version up so that you folks can see it, but just know there's a few things that are going to change. I think I made it up. I don't know how far. I went pretty far. So the idea is to do the whole thing. And this idea comes from Richard Dowenhauer. In 2007, he was trying to get me to do stuff like this. And so 14 years later, getting close to being done with this first one, and then to do a whole bunch of them like this as well, so that they are teaching tools. And we're able to sort of use the technologies we have today to sort of make it into bite-sized pieces. But then we can always come back and listen to the whole thing. And then if you really want to take this to the next level, you start telling this story in English and inserting as much Tlingit as you can. And then you start going, every line, I'll say it in Tlingit first and then I'll translate it. And then I'll say the whole thing in Tlingit. It's kind of it's a step ladder approach. That's how you get to the top of this hill. Okay, any thoughts or questions before we wrap up? Hooray. Lichéesh, Johan. Have a great weekend. See you next week.
Patakin.
Lichéesh. Lichéesh.
Lichéesh.
Gonna cheese. Quiche, Ziak, and
Siakin.